Welcome to Module 3, Writing an Effective Conclusion. If we look at the FSA rubric, we can see that conclusions are part of the purpose, focus, and organization category. In order to score a 3 or a 4 in this category, the rubric states that you must have a strongly maintained claim and a satisfying conclusion. In order to maintain your claim, you must reference it often throughout your paper. We have already looked at how to tie your body paragraphs back to the claim. However, this is done a little differently in the conclusion by using a method we call restating the claim. The second key to conclusions, as stated by the rubric, is to create a satisfying conclusion. This means that your conclusion clearly sums up your argument and does not leave the reader still questioning your key points or intended claim. The conclusion and the introduction are very similar in their construction. The introduction, as you have already learned, begins with a general idea about the topic and moves towards a more specific idea, which we call your claim. This is called the inverted pyramid. If you look at the picture to the right, you can see that the structure of the introduction looks just like a pyramid that is turned upside down or inverted. The conclusion, however, is constructed in the opposite manner. It begins with a more specific idea, the restatement of your claim, and moves towards a more general idea about the topic. Again, looking at the picture to the right, you can see how the conclusion is constructed like a normal pyramid, starting at a specific point and moving out to a more general idea. Before we begin discussing the steps to writing an effective conclusion, we'll start by watching 2 videos on writing conclusions. Be sure to follow along with your guided note sheet.
Created using Powtoon.
Writing a killer conclusion, a la Shmup. How much would you enjoy Iron Man if you never found out whether or not Tony Stark got the baddie?
Where did you go?
Imagine how unsatisfied you'd feel if every episode of your favorite sitcom ended at the 20-minute mark. Or how frustrated you'd be if we never ever finished this sentence. Conclusions are key. Without them, a story or essay flops and flounders. Everything worth telling deserves a well-conceived ending. Even our own lives will eventually have a conclusion. We just have to cross our fingers and hope there's going to be a sequel. Okay. So you're reading an essay that someone wrote and blam, no conclusion. Immediately, you probably ask yourself, so what? Why in the world did I just read all this stuff? What's the point or what's the moral of the story? And why am I asking all of these questions out loud? We can't help you with the last one. Maybe you just like the sound of your own voice. But as for the rest of it, it makes sense you'd be irritated. You just invested a lot of time and energy into reading something and no one is coming along to suggest what you should think of it and why. What are you supposed to do? Think on your own? But honestly, when you provide a thought-provoking conclusion, it's not like you're encouraging laziness on the part of the reader. The conclusion is merely your last chance to get the reader to see your side of the argument and hopefully to agree with you. So how do you accomplish that aside from offering a monetary incentive? You need to pull out all the stops, appeal to the reader's emotions, introduce a twist, basically whatever it takes, as long as it's legal. Because an argument essay will frequently be presenting a problem of some kind, a conclusion is a good place to offer a solution. Sure, oil spills may be increasing in frequency, but it would certainly be less of a downer if you had an idea or two about how to prevent such tragedies from occurring. However, you have to be careful not to introduce a major point and then leave it undeveloped within your conclusion. That's sort of like saying to your parents on the way out of the house, "Oh, by the way, I wrecked the car last night, toodles." Chances are that little snippet is going to leave your audience wanting to hear more. Think about the below questions anytime you're nearing the end of an essay. Pick at least one and make that the subject of your conclusion. What is an interesting, original way to restate my main points? It's been a while since the beginning of your paper. Remind your reader why they're here in the first place. Explain how the preceding points help to support that main idea, and hopefully your reader will now look at things in a slightly or drastically different way. What's important or interesting about the points I've made? There must be some reason you chose to write about whatever you chose to write about. Let your interest and passion in the subject matter shine through. Make your reader understand why they should care.
Because I'll kill you, that's why.
What can readers take away from my essay that is useful or that might shed light on their own lives or the world around them? People will always pay more attention to something if it is made personal to them. Someone may not give two hoots about the dwindling barn owl population, but if the reader is informed that barn owls are the only creatures that know the meaning of life, their interest may be suddenly piqued. Of course, you don't want to make stuff up just for the sake of intrigue. As we all know, barn owls have far more questions than answers. If I'm describing a problem in my paper, what might be a possible solution? Well, you might have some strong feelings on the subject. Now it's time to lay it on your reader. Just how are you going to solve the financial crisis? What can we do to prevent further melting of the polar ice caps? How will we be able to produce 100% edible sneakers? Whatever your tactic, make sure that you are passionate, engaging, and knowledgeable. And whatever you do, don't skip the conclusion. It's as unsatisfying for a reader as
I am Iron Man.
Meow.
subscribe.
As the video discussed, there are 3 simple steps that are involved in creating an effective conclusion. Step 1 is to restate your claim. You want to make sure you avoid repeating the same claim. Don't just copy and paste the claim from the introduction to the conclusion. You want to say the same thing, but by using different words. Step 2 is to summarize your key points. This should be about 2 to 3 sentences. Again, avoid just copying and pasting from your body paragraphs. Play your hits. You want to take the best information you had in your body paragraphs and restate or summarize them in the conclusion. The last step is to connect back to the hook or the first general idea you gave about your topic. Look back to that sentence you started your essay with and try to make a connection that elaborates on that idea but also gives some support to your argument. We call this the super so what. You want to let the reader know why this topic and your argument for or against it is so important to them. Let's look at an example of step 1. If we look back to the student data prompt that you wrote about, you may have started with a claim that said, sharing and collecting student data is a helpful resource for teachers and parents. To begin your conclusion, you want to restate, not copy and paste, the same idea. You could say, the collection of students' personal information is a beneficial tool in regards to better academic success. Both of these statements are saying the same thing, that student data is a good thing that is helpful in creating better education for students, but they do not use the same words. Now practice one on your own. If you have the claim, however, data collection is destroying student privacy and threatening students' intellectual freedom, how would you begin your conclusion? Take a minute to write a restatement of this claim that could start a concluding paragraph. One possible answer could be the excessive amounts of student data being collected by schools is a major privacy concern. Step 2 is where you will need to summarize your key points from your essay. This should be about 2 to 3 sentences long. You want to start by picking the best evidence you had to support your argument in your body paragraphs. Again, you want to avoid just copy and pasting the exact same sentences. Instead, you want to take that information, summarize, and restate it. Avoid using quotes from the articles. This information can encompass ideas you got from the articles, but it should be in your own wording. You also want to make sure you avoid introducing any new information. You're not trying to give the reader more ideas to think about, just to reiterate how important some of your key facts were. Now, if we go back to the restated claim we already looked at from the student data prompt, this is what summarizing key points in the conclusion might look like. The collection of a student's personal information is a beneficial tool in regards to better academic success. By collecting this data, teachers can refocus their instruction to better serve the needs of their students. Likewise, students can monitor their progress from the data collected and understand how they can improve their academic performance. If you want to take your conclusion a step further, you can add in a sentence that readdresses the counterclaim one last time. This will make your argument slightly stronger by again letting the reader see how your position on the topic is superior to the counterargument. You would put this sentence right after you restate the claim and then follow it with the summarization of your key points. This sentence is similar to the however sentence in your introduction, but you start it with the word though instead. Let's look at an example. If you had the same restated claim, the collection of students' personal information is a beneficial tool in regards to better academic success, your next sentence would say, though many believe that the collection of this data is an invasion of privacy, the benefits that come from having access to this data outweighs the cons. Here, you have addressed the counterclaim one last time and disproved it all in one sentence. You would then continue your conclusion just as we did before by summarizing your key points. The last step in writing an effective conclusion is to connect back to your hook, or your opening ideas about the topic. There are many ways to do this. You can end with a statement that tells the reader why this topic is so important. You can call the reader to some action, meaning that you are urging them to do something in order to prevent other things from happening in the future. You can give them a future warning as to what might happen if this issue is not resolved or fixed. You can end with a description that creates an image in the reader's head. You can end with a big question, but be careful with this one. You don't want a question that will possibly leave the reader disagreeing with you. This question should reinforce how important your topic and, more importantly, your position on the topic is. Lastly, you can simply reference back to the introduction. There is no magic way to pick which ending is best. You need to choose the ending that you feel most comfortable writing, while also making sure that the style of ending fits the essay that you are writing. Let's look at an example. Going back to the student data prompt, here we have the opening sentences to an introductory paragraph. It reads, "The collection of student data in schools has come a long way. Teachers now have access to almost any information about a student, including their test scores, socioeconomic status, home life, medical records, and discipline or achievement records." This opening focused on the big idea that teachers now have access to all kinds of information about a student. To connect back to the hook in the conclusion, you could say, "Imagine how many students could have reached their highest potential had their teachers only known exactly how to help them." This, again, touches on the idea that teachers have access to all kinds of information, but it spins the information to favor the side that says collecting student data is a good thing. This is an example of connecting back to the hook, while also creating an image or description for the reader. Let's look at a student example. As we read, try to identify the 3 parts of a conclusion. All in all, the sharing of students' personal data is a safe procedure that assists students in reaching their full potential, allowing them to meet and interact with other students who have the same problems as them. They can observe how they cope with their problems. The data that is shared should only be shared for educational purposes and no more. It allows students to feel like they belong and that people actually care about how their personal life affects their education. Self-esteem is boosted when grades and performance are boosted from the new education programs created. Sharing a variety of students' data is not an invasion of privacy as long as it keeps in the right hands and only used for educational purposes. All schools should share personal information to improve the lives of all their students and show parents how to help better educate their children. This student opens by restating their claim. All in all, the sharing of students' personal data is a safe procedure that assists students in reaching their full potential. They then play their hits by summarizing their key points from their body paragraph, allowing them to meet and interact with other students who have the same problems as them. They can observe how they cope with their problems. The data that is shared should only be shared for educational purposes and no more. It allows students to feel like they belong and that people actually care about how their personal life affects their education. Self-esteem is boosted when grades and performance are boosted from the new education programs created. This student took a spin on readdressing the counterclaim. They placed this after they summarized their key points. Sharing a variety of students' data is not an invasion of privacy, as long as it is kept in the right hands and only used for educational purposes. They could have easily moved this sentence up to be after the restatement of their claim. This student used a call to action as their concluding sentence, stating, "All schools should share personal information to improve the lives of all their students and show parents how to help better educate their children." So you can see with that last sentence that this student was trying to tell all schools that they need to start collecting data to improve the lives and education of their students. Let's write another example together. Remember when you learned about introductory paragraphs and we wrote a claim about the colonization of Mars? We said, "However, colonizing Mars is a risky venture and a waste of money that could be used to benefit our own planet." To restate this claim in the conclusion, we could say, "All things considered, the colonization of Mars is an expensive endeavor with too many hazardous uncertainties." To address the counterclaim again, we could say, Though many believe that the colonization of Mars could solve the overpopulation issues on Earth, there are just too many unknowns. To restate the key points, we could say it is unclear if human beings could even live in the environmental conditions on Mars. Billions of dollars would have to be spent researching new ways to cultivate land. Even more money would need to be spent building communities and facilities. And to end our conclusion, by connecting back to the hook, we could say, this one-way trip is one that our society is just not ready to make. Now you are ready to try these skills on your own. Take out the introduction and body paragraphs you wrote about the bicyclists. Write a concluding paragraph that could go with this essay. Remember to restate your claim, summarize your key points, and connect back to the hook. If you're still working on writing your conclusion, press pause on this video. Don't press play until you've finished. Once you are done, I want you to try rewriting the last sentence of your conclusion using a different technique. This concludes Module 3 on writing an effective conclusion. If you still have questions, be sure to ask your teacher for help.